I can say without contradiction, the working class applaud. However, the tree huggers like yourself oppose the boats, homeless, etc. No, it's her that opposes the homeless, mate. But chose to hide behind this thin veneer of false humanity. The only reason you think you win an argument is with your fancy words and misplaced education. That's me told, Gary. Honestly, it's a miracle I can get up and do the rest of the programme after being so roundly kneecapped by your expert analysis. Listen, mate, if you think you're speaking for the working class, you're a prat. It's one of the great rules of British politics, whoever you are, whether you're speaking up with things that I might agree with or whether you're speaking things I might disagree with. If you claim you're speaking for the working class, you're a prat. It's a golden rule. But at least Idiot's Corner has its first entrant this morning. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. Right, clear the board. Apologies. That's quite enough about Suella Braverman. I've now seen Anne Widdecombe on both the BBC and Sky News, which means that producers across the country are really, really struggling to find anybody prepared to speak in defence of either Suella Braverman or David Cameron's reappointment to the cabinet. I can't tell what it is that she's actually talking about, but my God, if Anne Widdecombe is on television, then I can tell you now, contacts books throughout Westminster and beyond have been shredded. Widdecombe is what you find. You get to the end of you phoned every possible guest to come onto a programme, and they've all said no, and then you ring them all again and beg, and they've all said no. And then in the corner of every newsroom in the country, there is a small red glass with a small red sort of pod with a glass front on it. And it says, in case of emergency, break glass. And if you break the glass, then inside you will find Anne Widdecombe's phone number. Which means if you have failed utterly to get any vaguely sensible, respectable or authoritative voice to answer a question that you as a programme editor feel needs answering, in this case, either, why has he appointed David Cameron, or why was Suella Braverman trying to cause a race riot this morning, then Anne Widdecombe would be the last. What comes after the last resort? What comes after the last resort? It's a bit like asking, what do you find after you've scraped the bottom of the barrel? Soil, I suppose, or grit. But anyway, Anne Widdecombe I've now seen on both Sky News and the BBC, which means that although today feels like a significant moment in British politics, an awful lot of the problems that beset both the political and the media landscapes remain firmly in place. So, this is a very strange appointment. I think I may owe the boy wonder, Henry Riley, an apology, because I was suggesting earlier today when the announcement was first made that it is perhaps not quite as shocking as everybody thinks it is. For the Lord Carrington precedent, the fact that Peter Carrington was both a member of the House of Lords and the Secretary of State Foreign Secretary, I think, when the Argentinians invaded the Falklands, something which saw him resign in an instance of individual ministerial responsibility. But actually, the more I think about it, the stranger it appears. So here's my early analysis. He needs somebody who is going to be unquestionably loyal up to and including any ambitions to replace him. So David Cameron, unless I am made of jelly, David Cameron will not be eyeing the opportunity to take over as leader of the party and or Prime Minister in the event of Rishi Sunak coming a cropper. We can agree about that, right? So that's a given. And that's quite a small group of people. I mean, to be fair, when a Prime Minister appoints his senior team, almost everybody in it will have at least part of one eye on the prospect of taking over as Prime Minister. I mean, they all believe that they're somehow capable. Even Nadine Dorries would have thought at some point that she could have a crack at becoming, but they almost all do. Oddly, the only high-profile politician of the last few years who almost certainly never thought there was any chance whatsoever of becoming Prime Minister until he became leader of the Labour Party was probably Jeremy Corbyn, actually. And I say that as a compliment, not as a criticism. But the rest of them, if they're getting appointed to high office, they will always be thinking, as Johnson explained, if the ball breaks from the back of the scrum, then it may fall to me to pick it up and run with it. So he's loyal. He will be able to portray himself as prioritising party over personal interests, which is nonsense because he's been running around the world doing the bidding of very, very rich people, some of whom may or may not have been quite dodgy, practically since he hung up the prime ministerial pinny. So he's going to be loyal, and he's not going to want to take over. And he's got very serious frontline experience. He was prime minister for 6 years. He won a general election. So he's got somehow, despite us all thinking of him as one of the greatest losers of modern times, he does have electoral victory, 1.5 electoral victories. He won one general election outright, and he won one to the degree that he was able to form a coalition government to get a working majority in Parliament. So, I mean, odd though it may seem to younger listeners, he is perceived in some quarters as a winner. He lost the referendum the year after he won the general election, but he did win the general election. He delivered a decent majority against the odds and against Ed Miliband. Chaos, remember? Chaos with Ed Miliband. That was his catchphrase. Vote for me and avoid chaos with Ed Miliband, said David Cameron in 2015. Whew. And then just look at the next 8 years that unravelled after that pronouncement. So there's that. So experience, status, like it or not, he fits the dictionary definition of a statesman, even of an elder statesman. He is a former prime minister. Didn't have that many big jobs before becoming prime minister, oddly, before becoming leader of the party, but that's partly because the Tories were in opposition for so long, and a lot of that generation rose in opposition. So power. He has experience of power, and his loyalty is unquestioned. So we'll put that on one side of the scale, right? Now, the bit where I get befuddled, the bit where I get confused, is when we start assembling the weights to go on the other side of the scale, which could be loosely described as baggage. The baggage that David Cameron brings now to the Foreign Office is surely going to outweigh the questionable notion that he is a genuine statesman and or a winner, a proven winner, and the loyalty, which I think is a given. Now, that's the thing that I don't think is challengeable. Listen, it's a phone-in. You can challenge it if you want, but I cannot for the life of me imagine seeing David Cameron pitching for Rishi Sunak's job anytime soon. So you've got loyalty and absence of leadership ambitions, plus experience and statesman-like record. That's on one side of the scales. Now, on the other side of the scales, you've got austerity and Brexit. Now, friend Gary, he probably thinks austerity and Brexit were a good idea, but I think it's fair to say that the constituency of people still clinging to that obvious nonsense is both shrinking and probably irredeemable now. If you're not ready to admit that austerity was a disaster and that Brexit is an unfolding disaster, then I don't know that reality is ever going to breach the processed pork products that pass for your brain. So who exactly looks at David Cameron's baggage and doesn't see a problem? Well, exactly, because he also campaigned for Remain. So even if you're a mutton-headed member of the ERG and you still think that austerity and Brexit were good ideas, you can't forgive him for being the leader of the Remain campaign, or the de facto leader of the Remain campaign. And he is woke, I suppose, or wet, or whatever the word of the week is to describe people who don't join in with the feasting on racist red meat that Suella Braverman has been serving up for the last couple of weeks. So why has he done it? Most recently, it was the Greensill scandal. He made a reported £3.3 million from shares in a company that subsequently collapsed. MPs report. Listen, I mean, this matters, I know it's a bit of a stuck record. An MP's report in 2021, I think it was July, accused Mr. Cameron of and I quote, significant lack of judgment in lobbying the government on behalf of the company. He was employed by this outfit called Greensill. In 2020, he tried to persuade ministers to let Greensill join a scheme called the Corporate COVID Financing Facility, which was basically loans issued on incredibly preferential terms and insured by the government. And they failed. They were unsuccessful. He was unsuccessful in securing these cushy little loans for the company's founder, Lex Greensill. And then by 2021, the entire company collapsed with the loss of 440 jobs and possible £1 billion losses for investors. But although he won't tell us how much he was paid, that's the point, you know. He's now coming back as Foreign Secretary with a financial scandal in his near past and a refusal to tell us how much he was paid by that company anyway. It's quite incredible. He has said that he was paid far more than his salary as Prime Minister. It was Panorama that found a letter from Greensill Capital to David Cameron, which suggests that he made £3.29 million after selling a bunch of shares he was given in the now collapsed company in 2019. This isn't normal. Well, maybe it is, but it's not right. So that's just one bit of baggage that you probably had forgotten about or didn't know about in the first place. So forget austerity and Brexit. We've got here taking millions of pounds from a company that went bust, and for which he sought to secure cushy government-insured loans. No breaching of the rules, but a significant lack of judgment. The most recent thing that British members of Parliament have said about David Cameron was that he demonstrated a significant lack of judgment in lobbying the government on behalf of a company that shortly afterwards went bust. So Rishi Sunak's made him Foreign Secretary. What's that you've got there, Dave? Oh, a significant lack of judgment, Rishi. Excellent. And £3.29 million. Now, that's the kind of language I talk. Would you like to be Foreign Secretary? Can I have a seat in the House of Lords? Of course you can. We'll make you a baron. Off you go. Job's a good one. Who waves their little nylon flag at this one, I wonder? Theresa May has come out with some warm words, but you can kind of understand why. She's nostalgic for the days when her party wasn't ruled over by obviously ridiculous individuals. Cameron is ridiculous, but not obviously so. Who chairs this? That's a question for the ages. Who chairs this? 0345 606 0973. So those are your two questions. Number one, why has Rishi Sunak made David Cameron Foreign Secretary? And I want serious answers only. That's not true. I'll take silly answers as well. 0345 606 0973. And the second question is, who cheers this? Seriously. Just like politically. Who in the party, the country, or even on Fleet Street? Who cheers this? Now, the News International, News Corps, or whatever they're called at the moment, they historically love him. Cameron made Andy Coulson his Director of Communications shortly before Andy Coulson went to jail for his deep involvement in the phone hacking scandals. His boss, Rebecca Wade, was writing to David Cameron before a big conference speech saying that they couldn't wait to work together. That's fair enough, you know. What's the point in operating a massive media organisation if you can't keep a Prime Minister in your pocket? But I don't know if they still like him now. I don't know if they still sort of have suppers together or if they still... So who cheers this? That's the same question in a way. Because if you tell me who cheers this, then the question of why has Rishi Sunak appointed David Cameron as Foreign Secretary possibly becomes easier to answer. But right now, I've got nothing.